This is live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and coming up in the next hour, International Monetary Fund delivers a positive outlook for the Indian economy, increases growth forecast for the fiscal year 2024-25 to 7%, which is up from the 6.8%. Global economy projected at 3.2% in 2024 and 3.3% in 2025. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and Mauritius Prime Minister Pravind Jagannath jointly inaugurate community development projects. Memorandum of Understandings exchanged in Port Louis. Roberta Metsola, re-elected as European Parliament chief, secures 562 votes out of 699. Becomes the first woman in 20 years to head the European Union Assembly in 2022. Kenya on the edge. Kenya police fire live ammunition at anti-government protests. Nationwide protests continue even as President William Ruto withdraws proposed tax hikes legislation. And Rwanda's President Paul Kagame all set for a fourth term in office. Provisional results showing him winning more than 99% of the vote. On Tuesday, the International Monetary Fund cautioned that the global economy is poised for a moderate growth in the next 2 years, marked by varying trends across major economies. In its latest update to its World Economic Outlook, IMF delivered a positive outlook for the Indian economy, increasing the country's growth forecast for the fiscal year 2024-25 to 7%, which is up from the 6.8% projected in April. As per the International Monetary Fund, the United States is experiencing cooling economic activity, while Europe appears to have reached a stabilization point. IMF also highlighted a declaration in the fight against inflation, potentially prolonging the delay in interest rate adjustments and maintaining strong pressure on developing economies from a robust US dollar. The IMF maintained its global real GDP growth forecast for 2024 at 3.2%, which is unchanged from its April projections, and slightly raised its 2025 forecast by 0.1 percentage point to 3.3%. Indian origin leaders are dominating politics across important world capitals. On Monday, one more person of Indian origin was added to this list when Republican candidate and former US President Donald Trump announced the name of Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance as Republican vice presidential nominee. J.D. Vance is the husband of Indian origin Usha Chilukuri Vance. Remember, Kamala Harris, who has a familial connection with India's down south state Tamil Nadu, also became the vice president of United States on January 20, 2021. Have a look at some of those Indian origin figures who have made a mark at world stage. DD India's Fuzail Ahmed gets us more.
India's rising global influence is being witnessed across the world. Its rich history, diverse culture and rising economy are being discussed worldwide. Experts say India has the potential to become a global superpower. All these have a massive impact on Indian origin people living abroad. They are actually preferred on all the top posts in almost all countries. On Monday, Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance was named the Republican vice presidential nominee by former President Donald Trump at the party's convention in Milwaukee. J.D. Vance's nomination sparked significant excitement among Indians as he's the husband of Indian origin Usha Chilukuri Vance, who's played a crucial role in supporting her husband, especially in his political journey. On top of the list is Kamala Harris, the first female US Vice President and the first person of Indian descent to hold this position. Her mother, Gopalan Shamala, was Indian and born in Chennai. Kamala's maternal family continues to live in Chennai. In 2022, former British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak made history after becoming Britain's first Indian origin Prime Minister. Sunak is married to Akshata Murthy, who is the daughter of Infosys founder N.R. Narayan Murthy. Indian origin Muhammad Irfan Ali is the 9th executive president of Guyana since 2020. Chand Santokhi is serving as Suriname's president since 2020 as well. He was elected president in an uncontested election after his party's win in the 2020 polls. Santokhi was born in 1959 into an Indo-Surinamese Hindu family in Lelydorp. Pravind Jugnauth, who is serving as the Prime Minister of Mauritius, was born into a Hindu family. Jugnauth's great-grandfather migrated to Mauritius from the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh in the 1870s. Indian-origin Singapore-born Tharman Shanmugaratnam is the current president of Singapore. He is also the first person of Indian descent to be elected president of Singapore. Antonio Costa, the former Prime Minister of Portugal, is of Goan descent. He is a sociologist and politician. He is half Indian and half Portuguese. Leo Eric Varadkar, former Prime Minister of Ireland, was born in Dublin. The Indian-origin Leo Eric Varadkar became the Irish Prime Minister known as Taoiseach in the country in 2022. Wavel Ramakalavan has been serving as the President of Seychelles since October 2020. His great-grandfather emigrated from the state of Bihar in India. Christine Kala Kangalu became the President of Trinidad and Tobago in March 2023 after serving as the President of the Senate. She was born into an Indo-Trinidadian family. Apart from politicians, there are a number of Indian-origin non-political leaders who hold key positions at multinational companies and global institutions. Ajay Banga was elected 14th President of the World Bank Group and began his 5-year term as World Bank Group President on the 2nd of June 2023. Banga started his career at Nestle, India. Sundar Pichai is an Indian-born American business executive. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Alphabet Inc. and its subsidiary, Google. Satyanarayana Nadella is an Indian-American business executive as well. He is the Executive Chairman and CEO of Microsoft. Arvind Krishna is the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of IBM. Neil Mohan is a business executive who is the current Chief Executive Officer of YouTube. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's outreach to the diaspora is a strategic part of his foreign policy, aiming to build a global community of Indians who are loyal to their host countries but also support their country of origin. The PM has established a special bond with the Indian diaspora. For the Indians who live abroad, Prime Minister Modi's visits resemble a visit from a family member. These interactions come across as a reunion.
That was Fuzail Ahmed's report for DD India. Well, aiming to boost ties with Mauritius, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is on a 2-day visit to the island country situated in the Indian Ocean. Dr. Jaishankar and the Mauritius Prime Minister Pravind Jugnauth jointly inaugurated high-impact community development projects. They witnessed exchange of agreements for space, cooperation, development of national curriculum, research institute, re-establishment of ICCR chair in Sanskrit, and Indian philosophy and digitization of Indian immigration archives, royalty payment checks issued for the sale of Mauritius nautical charts produced by Joint Hydrography Service Overseas Citizen of India or OCI cards distributed to 7th-generation Mauritius citizens. This reflects India's strong commitment to Mauritius's journey towards modernization and progress while also embodying the spirit of centuries-old ties. India will continue to work towards strengthening the multifaceted India-Mauritius partnership. In a joint address to the media, India's External Affairs Minister says that the visit underscores strong bilateral ties between the two nations.
Mauritius is one of the first countries that I am visiting in my current term as External Affairs Minister. It underscores the strength and depth of our bilateral ties. It is also an opportunity to underline India's unwavering commitment to its special and enduring partnership with Mauritius.
And among other engagements that External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar had in Mauritius was also calling on the country's Prime Minister Pravind Kumar Jugnauth in Port Louis on Tuesday. Dr. Jaishankar conveyed the warm greetings of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Mr. Jugnauth. They took stock of India-Mauritius special and enduring partnership and appreciated the further broadening of the ties. Dr. Jaishankar said he is looking forward to the continued collaboration and strengthening of India-Mauritius relations. In fact, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar Shankar is also on a visit to Mauritius, where he was received earlier by Mauritian counterpart Manish Gobin in Port Louis on Monday. India's External Affairs Minister also said that he looks forward to productive engagements to take forward the special relationship between India and Mauritius. In fact, the minister is on a two-day visit, which marks one of the first bilateral engagements undertaken by him following his reappointment. India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal is in the Italian coastal city of Reggio Calabria to participate in the outreach mission or the session of the G7 trade ministers meeting hosted by Italy. On the sidelines of the meeting, the minister met New Zealand's Trade Minister Todd McLay. The two leaders explored opportunities to give further impetus to bilateral trade and investment ties for the mutual growth of both the countries. Earlier, Indian Minister Piyush Goyal met Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Valdis Dombrovskis, and discussions focused on promoting India-EU trade and economic collaborations, which also included ongoing FTA negotiations. Israel has struck the southern and central Gaza Strip on Monday to put more pressure on Hamas. It follows a weekend strike targeting the terrorist group's leadership. The main focus of Israel's advance since May has been further south in Rafah, though its military also stepped up aerial and tank shelling in central Gaza. On Saturday, Israel struck Mawasi on the western outskirts of Khan Yunis. The town has been sheltering hundreds and thousands of Palestinians who fled to the area after Israel declared it a safe zone. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Israel's National Security Advisor Zachi Hengbi and Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer in Washington, D.C. on Monday to discuss practical solutions to bridge differences between Israel and Hamas on a ceasefire deal. Israeli officials confirmed that Israel is still committed to reaching a ceasefire deal under terms laid out by U.S. President Joe Biden on 31st of May.
The latest in the ceasefire negotiations that are ongoing, where we are trying to reach a ceasefire that would secure the release of hostages, alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian peoples. They talked about plans for the day after the conflict and how to establish governance and security in Gaza. And of course, as always, the Secretary raised the need to, even in advance of a hoped-for ceasefire, do more to resolve logistical issues that are preventing humanitarian assistance from being fully delivered across the Gaza Strip. Israel is still committed to reaching a ceasefire, that Israel wants to reach a ceasefire. Obviously, they want to protect their interests. We understand that as part of the negotiating process, but they do want to reach a ceasefire and are committed to these negotiations.
The Israeli army said that its air defense systems identified some 20 rockets launched from Lebanon on Monday night. Flares and explosions lit up northern Israel's sky as rockets fired from Lebanon intercepted over the town of Kiryat Shimona. The army also said that no casualties were reported from the attack, while dozens of northern Israeli towns and villages were evacuated. Ukrainian drone attacks have caused a fire at an electrical device factory which wounded at least 6 people in Russian areas bordering Ukraine. Interim governor of Russia's Kursk region said that one of the workers were injured in the attack. Russia's defense ministry says its air defense systems destroyed at least 13 Ukrainian drones overnight, including one drone over the Kursk region. And as per the local media, authorities are considering evacuating people from regions that are close to the Ukrainian border. Still to come on DD India News Hour. Coming up next, Republican nominee Donald Trump receives rapturous reception at a Republican National Convention. EU Parliament's first plenary session after the elections underway. Metsola stays frontrunner for the top position. Monsoon fury wreaks havoc across India. Heavy flooding triggers landslide.
As the world gears up for the biggest sporting extravaganza, Olympics 2024, we at DD India are all set to bring you reports, reactions and all the latest action from Ground Zero. Watch DD India's super exclusive show, Cheer for Bharat. Only on DD India from July the 22nd at 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT. Get ready to cheer for Indian athletes at the Paris Olympics 2020.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt. Let's move on. Former US President and Republican nominee Donald Trump received a hero's reception at Republican National Convention, his first public appearance after narrowly surviving attempted assassination. Trump did not address the convention but appeared alongside his running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden defended himself against criticism of his anti-Trump rhetoric that had been in a spotlight, so to say, in the shooting's aftermath, with an admission that his bullseye comment was a mistake.
Former US President Donald Trump received a heroic welcome at the Republican National Convention in Wisconsin 2 days after surviving an assassination attempt in Pennsylvania. He walked in with a thick bandage over his ear amid a crowd chanting, "Fight, fight, fight," and pumping their fists. Trump's right ear was grazed by a bullet in a shooting during a rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday, during which one supporter was killed and 2 others were injured. The Republican Party officially nominated Trump to run again for the White House. Trump is scheduled to formally accept the party's nomination in a primetime address on Thursday and will challenge Democrat President Joe Biden in the November 5 election.
This is an endeavor to make America strong again. And say it with me, fellow Republicans. This is an endeavor to make America great again! So here we go. It is my honor to nominate Donald J. Trump for the office of President of the United States!
The Republican Party also announced Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as Trump's running mate for the White House.
The question is on the motion that Senator J.D. Vance be nominated by acclamation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye!
Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden accepted that he made a mistake when he told supporters to put rival Donald Trump in a bull's eye in an effort to focus attention on his rival's behavior, but said Trump regularly employed rhetoric that was inflammatory. In another interview, Biden criticized Trump and stated that he was not surprised by the dismissal of a case concerning Trump's handling of classified documents, but he found the ruling misleading.
The basis upon which the case was thrown out, I find specious because I don't agree with Clarence Thomas' dissent and or the Supreme Court decision on immunity.
After the assassination attempt by a 20-year-old American, a non-profit body organized a civic engagement event for young Americans in New York City with the goal of equipping young voters with the information they need to participate in the upcoming 2024 presidential election. Syed Absarul Hassan for DD India.
Nick Harper joins us live from Washington, D.C. Let's go quickly across to Nick. Nick, fill us with the details of the first day of the RNC, which was also Trump's first appearance post-assassination, appearing alongside his running mate. Hero's welcome made it to the headlines, but has this incident really changed the tone and tenor of the elections from here on?
Well, no, not really at this stage, Sakal. We saw that triumphant return for the president, that hero's welcome, as you mentioned, really a moment when the party united around the former president. We saw Republicans in the audience there in Milwaukee clearly very emotional about seeing Donald Trump just 2 days after that attempted assassination. Some of them were cheering, some of them were crying, but it was a moment of real unity for the party. They're now into day 2 and they are moving on to the topic of immigration and crime and making the argument that Democrats have failed to secure America's borders, that millions of illegal immigrants have poured across that US-Mexico border during the 3.5 years of the Biden administration, and as a result, crime has got worse throughout the United States. Immigration, in many respects, has become the #1 voter issue in this election, very closely followed by the economy. And that is another topic that the Republicans will be hammering the Democrats on this week. I guess we had that slight lull, about 48 hours, when the topic was all about unity, about Democrats and Republicans working together after that attempted assassination, but things moving very swiftly now to looking at the main issues that the Republicans want to hammer the Democrats on.
Yes, presidential campaign events are now back on the track after a brief pause. But what are you picking up from President Biden's camp? We saw his first interview since Saturday incident. Well, he defended his comments, but at the same time called Bullseye comment a mistake, at the same time defiant on not stepping aside. So with that, do we ascertain that speculations of President Biden to step down from the competition, the speculations are over now?
Well, Sakal, it's gone very quiet on that front. We've seen no Democrats come forward since the attempted assassination on Donald Trump to call for Joe Biden to step down. And in many ways, he is now hoping, with the attention off him, that people may forget the problems that they've raised about his re-election bid. But he did, in that interview, as well as talking about the bullseye comment, have to defend his age at 81. He said that it was a legitimate question to ask whether he was fit for another 4 years in office. But he said people had to look at his record over the last 3.5 years and decide whether they felt he should be re-elected. He certainly hopes that he will be. He is now campaigning in the Southwest. He's spending today and tomorrow, Tuesday and Wednesday, in the state of Nevada. Today, he's speaking to black voters. Wednesday, he'll be speaking to Latino voters. He knows that those are two groups in the US that he very much needs to not only keep on side, but win over the next few months. Polls out in the last 24 hours show that he is trailing Donald Trump in the state of Nevada by about 4 percentage points. In the neighboring state of Arizona, also with a large Latino population, he's trailing by 7%. He knows he has a lot of ground to catch up, but he's hoping the issue of age, at least for now, has been put to one side.
We'll have to see whether that really happens or not, as much as President Biden really wants that to happen. But Nate, thank you so much. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you. Shifting focus to EU plenary, where Malta's Roberta Metsola has secured a broad backing for a new term as President of the European Parliament on Tuesday. Metsola, who took the post in 2022, is the only the second president after Germany's Martin Schulz to win another term since the EU Parliament became a directly elected institution in 1979. In continuing a largely ceremonial role, Metsola will preside over a 720-member parliament. Addressing the EU Assembly, Metsola said that the parliament should continue to be a strong supporter of Ukraine and seek the power to propose EU legislation. Meanwhile, a group of 63 European Parliament lawmakers have asked EU to withdraw Hungary's voting rights in the bloc in response to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban's recent visits to Moscow and Beijing. Orban met Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping on a self-styled peace mission to end the conflict in Ukraine. The lawmakers said that Orban had deliberately implied he was acting on behalf of the entire EU, despite not having the authority to do this, though lawmakers have no formal ability likely to strip Hungary of its voting rights other than putting political pressure on Brussels. Hungary took over the rotating EU presidency this month. Meanwhile, in a letter to EU leaders, Orbán said US Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump is ready to act immediately as a peace broker in the Russia-Ukraine war if he is elected in November. Orbán has long criticized European military support for Ukraine in contrast to most allies who support Kyiv's war effort. Alex Cadier joins us live from Brussels for the latest. Well, after EU elections, hi Alex, all eyes were on the EU plenary where Roberta Metsola seems to be the top favourite. It's almost a done deal for her, but what does it mean for the grouping?
Yeah, well, it is a done deal for her, but she will be presiding over a very different parliament. Indeed, more than a quarter of the MEPs in this particular European Parliament since those elections back in June, more than a quarter of those MEPs are from either far-right or hard-right parties. An important distinction because the ability to govern or the ability to block legislation in the European Parliament is primarily down to parties being able to work together. Of course, they are elected from 27 different member states. And at the moment, that quarter of the European Parliament, which is either hard-right or far-right, does not have a united front. What does have a united front is the centre-left, centre-right, centrist parties like Ursula von der Leyen and Roberta Metzola's European People's Party, the left, the Greens. They can work together under what Ursula von der Leyen has described as being pro-Europe, pro-Ukraine, pro-rule of law. They have that governing majority, but nevertheless, those far-right parties from Viktor Orban in Hungary to Marine Le Pen in France or Giorgia Meloni even in Italy, those three parties in the European Parliament will be a thorn in the European Commission and the European Council's side. It will be a more divided, more fractious, more confrontational Parliament than we've seen of late, and it's certainly going to be interesting to watch how that develops in the coming weeks.
Absolutely. And what is the kind of uncertainty that looms large on the vote on whether or not to elect Ursula von der Leyen as the president of the Commission for the second term? Is it going to be, or is it rather a tough time for her?
Well, we heard from senior officials in her political party, the European People's Party, and they say she's got the numbers.
Okay.
Nevertheless, Ursula von der Leyen has been spending the last couple of days speaking to MEPs from the left, from the Greens, from all over the political spectrum to garner as much support as possible because Roberta Metsola was able to sail through virtually unopposed, but for Ursula von der Leyen it will be more challenging. She will hold much more power. She will be in the European Commission, that building behind me, which drives the legislation in the European Union, drives the legislative process and holds a lot of power. And there is opposition to Ursula von der Leyen in this European Parliament. Make no mistake, it seems as though there's not enough opposition to stop her becoming president once again.
Okay, that's interesting. Alex, thank you so much for joining us live from Brussels. Thank you. Shifting focus to India, monsoons were amidst relentless monsoon fury across India. From the north to the south, floods and landslides have wreaked havoc. In Uttar Pradesh, the down south state of Kerala, the northeastern state of Assam, the Bihar, and even high altitude passes, nature's fury knows no bounds as of now. So as rivers surge and lands submerge, millions bear the brunt, while rescue efforts intensify nationwide. The struggle against rising waters has united communities in hope and resilience amidst adversity. Rabindra Chauhan of DD India gets us this report.
Heavy rain continued to trigger flood and landslides in various states of India, killing many and affecting hundreds of thousands. It continued to wreak havoc in India's most populous state, Uttar Pradesh, where over 1.4 million people across 20 districts have been severely affected. The state is grappling with extensive flooding. National Disaster Response Force and State Disaster Response Force teams are on high alert to assist in rescue and relief operations. In southern state of Kerala, the situation remains critical as heavy rains persist, particularly in the northern regions. The Indian Meteorological Department has issued a red alert for Kozhikode and Kannur districts, warning of further intensification until July 19. An orange alert has been issued for 7 districts and a yellow alert for 3 others. Rising water levels in the Periyar River have led to the submergence of the Eluva Mahadeva temple, underscoring the severity of the flooding. While in an incident occurred in Palakkad yesterday night, a mother and her son were killed when their house collapsed on Monday night due to heavy rains. The flood situation in northeastern Indian state of Assam is gradually improving but remains precarious. Hundreds of families of Assam's Morrigaon district have become homeless. Many people are still living on roads, bridge, embankment and high land since last a fortnight as their houses are still flooded. Not only flood, the river erosion also hit many people of the district. Assam's Governor Gulab Chand Kataria met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi to discuss ongoing relief efforts and rehabilitation measures. The Prime Minister assured full support from the central government to mitigate the impact of the floods in the state. In Bihar, the flood situation has worsened due to heavy rains in Nepal, causing rivers like Ghagra, Gandak, Koshi, Bagmati and Mahananda to rise above danger levels. This has inundated villages in districts such as Gopalganj, Sitamarhi, Darbhanga, Madhubani, Saharsa and Bhagalpur, forcing residents to flee to safer locations. The state government is actively engaged in evacuation and relief operations. Ravindra Chauhan's report for DD India.
The Common Service Centre under the Ministry of Information Technology celebrated its 15th anniversary in New Delhi on Tuesday. CSE, which has over 2 lakh centres across the country, grew to become one of the most successful model of delivering government services at the last mile. A prize distribution ceremony was also held on this occasion where excellent performing CSE heads were awarded for their achievements. Union Minister of State for Information and Technology, Jitin Prasad, who graced the occasion, praised CSE for their performance.
ये ही एक कड़ी है जो ग्रामीण क्षेत्र से जुड़ी है और जो डिजिटल डिवाइड को और जो हमारे प्रधानमंत्री आदरणीय नरेंद्र मोदी जी का सपना था और उनका संकल्प था कि टेक्नोलॉजी को द्वार घर घर गांव गांव तक पहुंचाएंगे और उपलब्ध कराएंगे, उसी की एक ये महत्वपूर्ण कड़ी है। मगर आने वाले 15 साल में क्या होगा इसके हमें विचार करना है। आज इसको नेक्स्ट लेवल पे कैसे ले जाना है, नई टेक्नोलॉजी से कैसे जोड़ा जाए, आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस का कैसे इसमें इस्तेमाल किया जाए और ई कॉमर्स हो, मुझे लगता है हेल्थ का आप ऑलरेडी कर रहे होंगे, करियर काउंसलिंग कैसे हो जाए, लोगों की रोजगार के जो वहां गांव में हैं उनको जानकारी मिल जाए।
Still to come on DD India News Hour, coming up next. Kagame on course to clinch Rwanda's presidential polls with a landslide margin of at least 99%. Renewed protests in Kenya claim 1 life. Pressure mounts on President Ruto to step down. And nation pays tribute to 4 Indian Army soldiers martyred in a gunfight with terrorists in Jammu Kashmir's Doordarshan district.
Voice of a rising aspirational world. Stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. Embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and shifting focus to our top story, that is on the rise of India's diaspora as leaders in the political and governing spectrum across the globe, in financial space and much more. Basically, we will put in perspective the Indian origin people across globe at leading or perhaps at the leadership positions. And to do so, Professor Harshvardhan Pant, Vice President ORF, joins us for more. Thank you very much, Professor Pant. It's always a pleasure talking to you, sir. Now, in recent decade, we've seen India has grown as a global power and has been able also at the same time to pursue in its own goals in its own way, like what we call India Way. How do you see the recent spurt in numbers, especially in one decade, the rise of Indian origin people, especially at the leadership positions in political spectrum across the leading capitals of the world?
Yeah, it has been very, I think, gratifying to see so many people of Indian origin doing so well politically across the globe. And I think what has also happened, interestingly, is that as India has risen, this trend has intersected with this idea of Indians, people of Indian origin doing well. So there has been this, it has accelerated this India story that we have been talking about. It has amplified the India story in many ways. And I do think that, a lot of factors, of course, are at play here. But certainly having people of Indian origin in key positions of power across the world, globally, it gives a great degree of satisfaction to, and it underlines the fact that Indians, wherever they are, whichever country they are serving to the best of their abilities, and they are being accepted socially and politically, unlike some of the other communities where there are reservations. You don't see that those reservations impacting Indians as they rise in social hierarchy, in political hierarchy across the world.
Indians at the decision or Indians at the decisive positions or in decision-making bodies, political and apolitical also, like IT, finance, etc. Do you also think that aids in a big way as far as India's negotiating power or India's rise as a global power, the bigger role of India at the world stage is concerned?
Certainly, I think it's a very important aspect of India's soft power. This idea that India can produce so many talented people who are serving in their own ways different spheres around the world, whether it is technology, whether it is education, whether it is social philanthropy, whether it is politics. And I think that in some ways energizes this rise of India, that gives wings to the ambitions that India is crafting for itself on the global stage. So as we look at some of these very, very specific domains that you're talking about, particularly now as we are looking at the screen, you have different IT sector, for example, dominated by the Indians. That certainly amplifies India's role in that space, that India has such a talent pool that you can have the best and the brightest holdings of these most important positions, and also reaffirming India's role as a critical voice in these domains. So when the world talks today about information technology, when it talks about data issues, data related issues, it looks at India as a key enabler in these conversations. And certainly having people of Indian origin holding these positions reaffirms that India continues to be a very, very important voice in finalizing some of the architecture that the world needs in managing these key critical domains.
Having said that, how do you see Prime Minister Modi's diaspora outreach and the way it has been made such an integral part of our foreign policy?
I think that in some ways has been the story of the last decade, where Indian diaspora has been tapped in a very in a singular fashion by the government. And I think the sense of linking, of using diaspora as a bridge between the two entities, India and the countries in which they are, has served India very well. So today when you go across the world, you can go to any country, you see Indian diaspora playing such an important part in not only making their presence felt, but they are also reassured by the fact that the government of India has their back, that the government of India supports what they are doing, and that they want to contribute to the India story as well. So I think this initiative by the Prime Minister to engage the Indian diaspora, successful as they are across the world, in the India developmental story, I think has great potential, and one hopes that it continues in the future as well, because that's an asset, that's a soft power of India that had been largely untapped before. So now that we are finally tapping into it, I think we'll have to give greater incentives, and we'll continue to see greater engagement as far as the government of India is concerned with this diaspora, which the Prime Minister has led so successfully over the last decade.
So all these Indian origin exceptionally brilliant people at at the helm of affairs across the globe. They are, your final comments, definitely a part of the, you said New India story, I would say, you said India story, I would say New India story. New India story where we are looking at India's exceptionalism and how India is holding on its own. Your final comments on that.
Indeed, I think as India continues to grow into an economy that eventually, in a few years down the line, hopes to become a $10 trillion economy, from moving from 3, 4, 5, 7 to 10 trillion over the next decade.
Right.
It is going to be very important to leverage our power, different aspects of our power, and this is certainly the most important aspect of our soft power. And I think that's where it becomes so interesting as India looks to amplify its voice on the global stage. We have people of Indian origin at different domains and different verticals, politically so potent at the moment that we can use them and we can leverage those voices in amplifying India's voice on the global stage.
So that in a way is also adding multitude of dimensions. Final word, Professor Pant, as far as India's regional primacy is concerned. And this is only going to multiply, hopefully.
Absolutely. I think that is only going to happen because the talent pool, the demographic dividend that India has, will ensure that many more of Indians will continue to find space, find their domains across the world, and they will continue to dominate these sectors given the strengths of our inherent education and higher education structures. So I think this is a story that is likely to be further amplified in the future, and therefore India and Indian governments should be keen to see how they can leverage them much more effectively, as we have done, we have started to do over the last decade.
Right. More negotiating space and maneuvering for India's global role as an international power. On that note, thank you very much. I'm sorry, that's all we have time for. Professor Pant, such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you. The Indian Army has said that it is committed to eliminate the scourge of terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir as it paid rich tributes to 4 soldiers martyred in a gunfight with terrorists in Doda district of Jammu and Kashmir. Based on specific intelligence inputs, a joint operation was launched by the Army and Jammu Kashmir Police on Monday, following an exchange of fire with terrorists in Desa area of the Doda district. Additional troops were called in later to support the counter-terror operations which were underway in the area. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has expressed condolences and said the government is committed to restore peace and order in the region. Wreath-laying ceremony for the martyred soldiers was held earlier today. Citizens of Rwanda have voted to elect their next president on Monday, with early results showing incumbent Paul Kagame in the lead with 99.15% of the votes. Monday's vote is widely expected to give Kagame a 4th term and extend his near quarter century in charge of the East African country. Presidential candidates Frank Habineza from the Democratic Green Party and an independent Philippe Maipaimana said that they were hoping to make some progress, but an analyst and rights group said that Kagame's overwhelming victory is certain. Results are expected by 20th of July. We have Chris Okarminga joining us from Kinshasa on the latest on Kagame's landslide win in Rwanda. Now, is it, Chris, just a matter of time when the results in favor of Kagame are going to be declared, though we will have to officially wait till 20th of July? How does it work?
So supporters of President Paul Kagame are already celebrating across the country after the Electoral Commission declared that he got 99% of the votes cast, and they have already counted about 80% of the votes that were cast out of about 9 million Rwandans who were eligible to vote. So there's a lot of celebration in Rwanda. This is an election that was expected by many people because President Paul Kagame has been a clear favorite. He has led the country for 24 years with an iron fist. Opposition hasn't been tolerated, and he has carried out a number of reforms that many people in Rwanda are very happy about. Although his critics have been saying that he has been stifling dissent and has been fomenting chaos in neighboring countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo. But by and large, the people in Rwanda are saying that they have carried out their democratic duty and are happy about the outcome that was announced by the Electoral Commission. Like you mentioned, the Electoral Commission is expected to announce the provisional results on July 20th, but it's pretty much a done deal. And so we're waiting to see what will go on from now on.
Okay, so can I say that this was no contest, or was it really given that it's going to be him again, given his pro-people policies and his popularity? Was there actually a competition or a contest?
Well, many observers who have been closely following happenings in Rwanda saying that this election didn't have any. President Paul Kagame didn't have any opposition.
Okay.
The Electoral Commission earlier this year barred some prominent opposition candidates who were really going to stand against the president and perform much better, according to people in Rwanda. There were a total of 8 who expressed interest in running for this election, but only 2 of them were allowed to participate in the election by the Electoral Commission, and both these candidates got less than 1% of the votes cast. So many people, many observers of what's happening in Rwanda are saying that this was not genuinely a competitive election.
Okay.
And President Kagame is still having a very firm grip on the affairs, all affairs of the country in Rwanda.
Okay, President Kagame on course for a big win, but as of now, we'll have to wait till July 20th. Thank you very much, Chris, for joining us live from Kinshasa on Rwanda elections. And still to come on DD India News Hour, coming up. Kylian Mbappe was officially unveiled as new Real Madrid player. And Chinese doping cases ahead of Tokyo Olympics.
As the world gears up for the biggest sporting extravaganza, Olympics 2024, we at DD India are all set to bring you reports, reactions and all the latest action from Ground Zero. Watch DD India's super exclusive show, Cheer for Bharat. Only on DD India from July the 22nd at 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT. Get ready to cheer for Indian athletes at the Paris Olympics 2024.
We just don't bring you the news as it unfolds. We get to the heart of the matter.
We don't just present facts. We demystify complex social, political and economic events.
We break stories that shape the world's present and future because you deserve the truth.
I am Tanvi Taneja from New Delhi.
I'm Ollie Barrett from London.
I'm Nick Harper from Washington, D.C.
Join us on DD India Global Monday to Friday at these times.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt. Let's move on and shifting our focus from Rwanda to Kenya, where at least one person was killed in renewed anti-government protests across Kenya on Tuesday. Kenya's police clashed with demonstrators who are demanding the resignation of President William Ruto. In Kitengela, which is on the outskirts of the capital Nairobi, police fired repeatedly at hundreds of protesters. In Nairobi city centre, police fired tear gas at several dozen protesters. Youth-led nationwide protests broke out a month ago against proposed tax hikes. These protests have continued even after President Ruto withdrew 2.7 billion in tax hikes on June 26 and sacked nearly his entire cabinet. According to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, at least 50 people have been killed in the protests till date. Isabel Nakiria from Kampala joins us on the latest as far as Kenya protests are concerned. What is the situation on ground? It doesn't really look good. And despite President Ruto conceding to demands a month ago and withdrawing a huge chunk of tax hikes, it seems that the tension continues to simmer. So is this basically about him vacating the position of power and stepping down?
Practically, that would be the answer to your question. Of course, today there was another day of protests, running battles between the police and the protesters. Protesters are demanding for good governance and democracy in Kenya, and of course the withdrawal of President Ruto as presidency. But we have seen on the streets a brutal force that has come out today to fire tear gas at protesters and lobby, lobby tear gas and lobby
tear gas
protesters.
Yeah.
We understand that some people were shot dead. We still do not know the confirmed number of people who are dead, but many people were arrested. We are told that some were abducted, which human rights bodies have condemned. We also hear that some journalists were shot at. A journalist from a local TV, K24, was shot in the thigh, and by the time she was whisked off to the hospital, the bullet was still lodged in her thigh.
Oh my
and
God.
we also understand that some masked people came out on the streets with clubs to try and disperse off protesters, but they got resistance from the protesters who disarmed them and forced them to frog jump to a nearest public space, and they were ordered to leave the city center. We also hear that some tear gas was lobbied into a hospital, and some school children were seen running into a school van while covering their noses. Police also stormed a religious facility where people had sought refuge and tried to beat them out and force them out of the church. But we were told that the people who were arrested were also, the protesters tried to, storm that facility, police station, and try to set them free, but they were forced out by the tear gas.
So, Isabel, what we understand from your report and the visuals is an absolute anarchy on the streets. And we haven't, have we heard anything from President Ruto? What is his plan to contain this situation, which seems to be as of now spiraling out of control? And I think there has to be some credibility that the government needs to take, because you mentioned more than 50 lives have been lost, and the kidnappings and the way people are apprehended or arrested reportedly.
For now, we haven't had any news from the presidency. President Ruto has not yet made any statement, but from the brutality of the force that came out today, we do think that the president has ordered the police to come out in full force and try to stop the protests. From the side of people masked, holding clubs and trying to disperse of protesters on the street, we think that President Ruto this time is coming out with brutal force to try and stop these protests and not escalate like it was before. And we also know that some people have been arrested. We do not know how many so far, and there have not been any confirmed reports of deaths as yet, but we saw people lying on the streets with blood coming out of their heads or bodies, and were taken away, and some emergency help was being administered to some of the people who were shot on the street. President Ruto has, at a rally, he said that he accused the Ford Foundation of funding the protests in Kenya, and the Ford Foundation came out and said that they were not behind these protests, all they do is fund grants in Kenya. We know that they were behind the climate conference last year in Kenya, and they say they are very, they do not fund any protests.
Right, we'll have to see how this situation pans out in the next 48 hours, considering that President Ruto has sacked nearly his entire cabinet and the situation absolutely looking bad. Thank you very much, Isabel, for joining us live from Kampala, and please do take care of yourself. Thank you. And you're watching DD India's News Hour. Time now for some sports news. Kylian Mbappe was officially unveiled as new Real Madrid player on Tuesday at Santiago Bernabeu Stadium in Madrid. He signed for the Real Madrid as a free agent on a 5-year contract after leaving Paris Saint-Germain. The 25-year-old joins a star-studded side in Madrid with the likes of Vinicius Jr. and Jude Bellingham. A World Aquatics audit into the handling of positive drug tests by Chinese swimmers concluded that there was no mismanagement or cover-up by the governing body while offering recommendations to restore athlete confidence in the anti-doping system. The World Aquatics report reached a similar conclusion as Swiss prosecutor Eric Cottier, who conducted an independent investigation into the case and also determined that all protocols were followed without favoritism. The two reports have done nothing to sway US sporting and anti-doping officials, who continue to demand a hearing and a more complete investigation. That's all for this edition of DD India News Hour, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Sakal Bhatt from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour. Thank you.